Xfinity won its title sponsorship of the secondary series after 2025, and could NASCAR potentially return to Bowman Gray in 2026? What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. First paint scheme we're taking a look at is Matt Mills' 2025 JF Electric scheme that we'll see in a lot of races in 2025. Scheme looked very similar to last year's scheme from 2024, but I thought last year's scheme did look okay in my opinion. The colors look solid. Looking forward to see on the racetrack this year. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tyler Reddick's 2025 Beast Unleashed schemes that we'll see throughout a lot of races in 2025. I gotta say these are a little bit of a downgrade from 2024. They did take a little bit of a step backwards from last year. They are very similar, but they took a little bit of a step backwards from 2024, but they're not as bad as we've seen overall. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Nathan Burr's 2025 Sonesta scheme that we'll see at Daytona next week. Scheme looks alright in my opinion. Do like the colors of it overall. It's solid utilization of the sponsorship placement. It's a solid paint scheme overall, to be honest with you. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Alex Labay's 2025 Black Diamond Garage scheme that we'll see at Circuit of the Americas. I really like this paint scheme. The colors do look really, really good. I think they do look very solid. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this year at COTA. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Justin Allgaier's 2025 Brant Citrus scheme that we'll see at Daytona and Homestead Miami Speedway. I like the fact they're changing up the brand scheme. I've always liked the iconic brand scheme that Justin Allgaier's had, but I do like, especially since we're going to Miami, I do like the fact that they're kind of changing up this time around. I think it does look really, really solid. I think did a really, really good job on it, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Daytona and Miami. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Crocs. As it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday that Crocs is NASCAR is releasing another line of Crocs shoes that will be also in association with Realtree. This will be a camo-like branding and it will be $69.99. NASCAR started working with Crocs, I believe, at the end of 2024, and they're expected to release a lot of different lines of branding over the course of the next couple years. I gotta say, these shoes do look really, really cool. I do like the look of the Crocs. They do look really, really solid. And I think it's pretty cool to see that Crocs will be working a lot closer with the series going forward. And overall, it's good to see that Crocs will get to work with NASCAR going forward in the future, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Celsius. As it was announced a couple days ago, that Celsius will be sponsoring AJ Allmendinger and Christian Eckes at Daytona International Speedway. This is not shocking and surprising considering Celsius has been working with College Racing over the course of the last couple of years. They were, of course, going to sponsor Christian Eckes at quite a few races throughout 2025. We talked about this on the channel. And it's really good that Celsius will continue working with the series and working with College Racing going forward. You got to see the cars in the background. They do look really, really cool. Nonetheless, glad to see that Celsius will continue working with the team in 2025. And the first time we'll see Christian Eckes in Celsius colors in his career up to this point. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about PPG. As it was announced 2 days ago, the PPG will be sponsoring Josh Berry later this year at the Brickyard 400. This will be the first new sponsor that Josh Berry's picked up for 2025. We already know the Dex Imaging is going to sponsor him for a couple races this year. We also do know some other companies like Motorcraft have already sponsored him in 2025. PPG, of course, is association with Team Penske. Remember, the Woodburns also do have an alliance with Team Penske, which is a big reason why this is continuing on going into this year. I think it's really exciting to see, nonetheless, that he'll have a new sponsor for the Brickyard 400. We don't know how many races PPG is going to sponsor the other cars at Team Penske this year, but good to see that PPG will be back to work with Josh Berry and work with the team for the first time later this year. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chili's. As it was announced a couple days ago on Monday morning that Chili's will be sponsoring the ARCA race at Daytona International Speedway. The race is going to be called the Ride the Dente 200. Chili's has been getting a lot more involved in motorsports over the course of the last couple of years. They're going to sponsor Kyle Kirkwood for a ton of races in IndyCar in 2025. And they're also going to sponsor Justin Haley in 2025 as well in select races with Spire Motorsports. And this will be the first time that we've seen a Chili's entitlement sponsorship for a race in a very, very long time. To me, I really like the name overall. I think it's a cool name that they're kind of bringing in this time around. And I think it's also great to see that companies like Chili's are stepping up to the plate and wanting to work to grow the sport as a whole. Pretty exciting stuff for sure, and glad to see that Chili's will be sponsoring the ARCA race, because that's going to have people like, I think it's going to have some big names like Cletus McFarland running it, Elio Castroneves, Corey Day among the ones that are going to be entering. I think maybe Tony Breininger is also going to enter it. We'll see who ends up entering with the Chili's sponsorship this year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Interstate Batteries. As it was announced yesterday morning that Interstate Batteries will be returning to sponsor Joe Gibbs Racing for the 34th year in a row. They will sponsor Christopher Bell for 4 races in 2025, including at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and they will only sponsor Ty Gibbs for 1 race in 2025. This will be less than the last couple of years, because in prior years, they've actually sponsored all 4 drivers at the organization. Last year, they sponsored all 4. That being, of course, Christopher Bell, Ty Gibbs, Mark Truex Jr., and Denny Hamlin. It seems like maybe Interstate Batteries is backing away a little bit on their sponsorship, but it's really awesome to see that a company like Interstate Batteries is continuing to work with Joe Gibbs Racing. They've been there since the beginning for Joe Gibbs Racing, going all the way back to 1992, and I believe they have the longest entitlement sponsorship with one organization or one team, maybe in a long, long time. I don't think we've ever seen a company work or sponsor work with the same team for as long as we've seen. So I think it's pretty exciting nonetheless to see this, and I think it's great to see the Interstate Batteries is back once again in 2025. I think the fans wanted to see that, and I think it's, again, very good to see that a lot of people are going ahead and seeing them return in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about North Wilkesboro. As it was announced yesterday afternoon that they have announced who will be doing the pre-race concert at North Wilkesboro Speedway, and it will be Jake Owen. Jake Owen, for those who do not know, was kind of big in the mid to late 2000s and also kind of big in the mid to late 2010s with some of the biggest hits in country out there with songs like 8 Second Ride, of course, I Was Your Jack and You're Diane, or whatever that song is called, and some other big songs over the course of the last couple of years. Now, Jake Owen hasn't released anything, at least in the last couple of years, that has been as big, but I think at least he's kind of relevant. Some people do know who he is. He's released some good songs, in my opinion. So I think he's definitely an interesting choice to go with for sure. I think it's interesting to see that they're going to go ahead and go with Jake Owen this time around. I'd like to see someone a little more modern, but it's North Wilkesboro, so it's also not shocking to see they're not getting someone completely modern, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bowman Gray. Now, I think it was posted by Matt Weaver yesterday evening that the fence that was up at Bowman Gray has been officially started to be coming down. Now, the safety barriers and everything around the track are expected to stay around for a long time, but the fence that was up at Bowman Gray Speedway is now starting to come down. Now, there were a lot of fans who are fans of Bowman Gray saying, why did they have to put up a fence in the first place? Well, one big reason they had to put up a fence is because, especially if a next-gen car decides to go over the fence and run to somebody, you could have a lot of lawsuits that are coming into play, and that's one of the reasons why they had to put the catch fence up at the track. I get that a lot of fans want to get up close and personal with the cars that are racing, whether it's the crazy racing with the modifieds or whatever it is. They want to go ahead and get up close and personal with the track. The problem is that if lawsuits start coming into play, it could be a really big issue. Bowman Gray could end up getting shut down because of it. So I think they made the smart decision overall to keep them up, at least for the Clash. Now, it seems like, especially if Bowman Gray does come back in 2026, that it seems like it's a pretty quick thing where they can go ahead and put him back up, and they can put him back up very, very quickly. But I think it's good that they're kind of going back to the old thing they're doing, where they're not going to have the fence back up, but I also understand why they brought him up this time around. I think they had no choice but to do it, in my opinion, and I think it's very interesting nonetheless to see that they're doing it. They're putting them back up after being down for a long time. It is certainly interesting overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Christopher Bell. As it was announced last night that Christopher Bell will be competing in the World of Outlaws in about a week or so at Volusia Speedway. I can't remember exactly which team he will be driving for, but it's going to be the first time that Cristobal has competed in the World of Outlaws, I believe, since like 2020 or 2021. Now, Cristobal has been starting to get back into dirt racing after Joe Gibbs Racing lifted the dirt ban over the off-season last year in late 2024, going into 2025. And all the drivers at Joe Gibbs Racing, if they want to, they're allowed to go in dirt race. That's why Cristobal is having this chance and the opportunity in the first place to go ahead and race in the World of Outlaws. I do think that Cristobal is going to be very, very competitive. We saw how fast he was at the Tulsa Shootout, and we also saw how quick he was when he did race at the other big events at the Chili Bowl. He didn't, unfortunately, have a fantastic run in the A-Main of the Chili Bowl, but he won the B feature. He looked really, really fast and very, very competitive in that. And he hasn't won a lot of World of Outlaws races in his career. But I do think that Cristobal is going to have a solid chance and opportunity to go out there and win in the World of Outlaws. I think it's going to be fun to see what he can do, and I think it's great that he's going back to dirt racing. I think seeing drivers on the track to get better performance, I think it will be something that can definitely help him when we get on the track this year, which we already were on the track. He had decent speed. I think when we get out to tracks like Vegas later this year, I think it could help him in a pretty big way. I think it's awesome to see that he'll be competing in the World of Outlaws race at Volusia in about a week or so from now. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. As Spire Motorsports revealed yesterday late evening the roster for the number 7 car for 2025. And there are 3 notable people that were announced yesterday and confirmed. Obviously, we knew that Rodney Childers was going to be the crew chief for Justin Haley in 2025 at the end of last year. Cheddar Smith, who was the car chief for the number 4 for Josh Berry and Kevin Harvick for many, many years, he is going to be the car chief for the number 7 car in 2025. And Eddie DeHaan, as expected, will be the spotter for Justin Haley throughout 2025. They've got a really solid lineup over there on that number 7 car. I said this coming into the year. I think Justin Haley and Rodney Childers are the combo and a duo that I really think has a lot of potential to grow. Josh, we've seen it with Rodney Childers. He has taken drivers who have not always been the best on the racetrack, and he's been able to help them get really, really good out on the track. And I think that with Rodney and Justin teaming up, there's so many chances and opportunities for this number 17 to really do good next year. The number 7 car has kind of struggled in the Cup Series over the course of the last couple of years, and when Corey LaJoie was behind the wheel of this car last year, he didn't really do a good job, and he was way behind his teammates Zane Smith and, of course, Carson Hocevar last year in performance, especially since Zane Smith in the second half of the year got very, very well. So I do think it's going to be interesting to see how this team performs. We don't know how long the contract is for all these people, how long they're going to stick around with the team, but I think it's awesome that the number 7 team has been revealed, and I do like all the people that are on the roster for the number 7 car. I think it's really exciting to see the people that are going to be part of that group in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Rolex 24 TV ratings. As there was a report by Adam Stern on Monday evening that NBC says it averaged 901,000 viewers for the Rolex 24's 3 windows that aired on both TV and Peacock. That is up 140% from 2023 and also 2024. Keep this in mind. They showed a lot less of the Rolex 24 on TV this year. I think they only showed about maybe 5 or 6 hours altogether compared to prior years, where they've nearly shown about 12 hours of the Rolex 24. If you wanted to watch most of the race this year, you had to go to their streaming service called Peacock to watch the whole entire event. And I think that Peacock did have some issues from time to time when it came to the internet, among other things. But to see that more people are starting to tune into the Rolex 24 and it being up, I think is absolutely huge. Now, obviously, there was some interest in seeing that Trackhouse car run. Many were interested in that, especially with, Shane Van Gisbergen, one of the most popular drivers in the NASCAR Cup Series going into the year, and also Connor Zilisch working with that car. I do think that is certainly interesting because a lot of people want to see how that went, especially with Scott McLaughlin being there too. I think a lot of people are watching to see how that car performed, but I also think there is an increased interest in IMSA racing and sports car racing. That's why you're seeing new manufacturers like Ford show up, and you're going to have a GTP program, it sounds like. And you've got interest from McLaren having a GTP program and a program of the World Endurance Championship. Sports cars has something going right for it at the moment, and I think that things are working out very, very well for IMSA at this particular moment in time. So I think it's pretty exciting to see this for sure, that the Rolex 24 TV ratings came out and they were up. That's a huge win in my opinion for the sport. And I think it's, again, very good to see that the Rolex 24 continues to grow in a way it is. I think the Rolex 24 is one of the best events out there in the moment, and I do believe overall that the Rolex 24 should be something that is talked about all the time, and I think it's a fun event, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Blaney. Now, Ryan Blaney, of course, finished runner-up in the NASCAR Cup Series Cookout Clash a couple days ago. And basically, a lot of people were wondering, why did Ryan Blaney just not run over Chase Elliott at the end of the race? And he talked about the fact that he got to race Chase Elliott very fair and very, very clean. Well, Ryan Blaney said the reason he did not want to get wrecked by Chase Elliott or run into Chase Elliott in the first place is because he didn't want to have fans at Bowman Gray being pissed off and frustrated with him, and he didn't want people chasing him out of the track with pitchforks. No pun intended. Obviously, Chase Elliott is the most popular NASCAR driver. Anyone that runs into Chase Elliott out on the racetrack, you're going to most likely get people that are really pissed off and angry with you because Chase Elliott, we know, is very much the most popular driver. Because a lot of the Bill Elliott fans, the Jeff Gordon fans, and the Dale Sr. and Dale Jr. fans went over to become fans with Chase Elliott. If you do anything to Chase Elliott, there's a very good chance and possibility that you're going to have people that are very, very angry with you. But also, I think we have to realize something around Ryan Blaney and Chase Elliott. Ryan Blaney and Chase Elliott are very, very good friends off the racetrack. And that's another reason why I don't think Ryan Blaney was going to wreck Chase Elliott to win a race like that. And I think drivers like Austin Dillon could learn a thing or two about that, considering Austin Dillon intentionally wrecked two drivers to win a race. Yes, we know they're both were very unpopular, that being Denny Hamlin and Joey Logano at Richmond last year. But I don't think that we want to see drivers doing this where they're just wrecking each other to win races, because that's a bad thing. Plus, you got to think about the rules coming into play now with the fact if you try to right rear somebody or intentionally wreck somebody, you could end up losing your eligibility for the playoffs, or not eligibility for the playoffs, but there is a chance you could get in a lot of trouble and you have to start at 0 playoff points. That's probably one of the reasons why we didn't see Ryan Blaney do what he did to Chase Elliott on the track like we've seen other drivers do on the track. So in my opinion, it's certainly interesting for sure to see this, and I think you're going to see less and less of drivers racing like idiots. I think more respect is going to be out on the track, which is what we want to see, because we don't want to see drivers taking each other out to go to victory lane on other things, and I think it's definitely something to kind of think about for sure. And overall, I do think that Ryan Blaney racing Chase Elliott fair and clean is the best thing that can happen on the track, because I don't think we want to see drivers pissed off each other, especially since it's an exhibition event. Ty Gibbs can learn a thing or two from that, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Burt Myers and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Now, if you watched the Cookout Clash a couple days ago, you saw the incident between Burt Myers and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Now, originally, a lot of us had thought that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. had intentionally taken Burt Myers out going down the front straightaway on the track, because when we saw the car, his car was completely destroyed up in turn number 1. Now, Fox, is like always, didn't do the best job when it came to showing camera angles of the situation out on the track. I cannot remember exactly who it is. I think it was a guy named John, I'm pretty sure, posted this on Twitter, if I'm not mistaken. We finally were able to get a good vantage point of the incident. And when I take a look at the incident that took place on the track, it looked like maybe something broke on the car for Burt Myers, because he just came all the way across the racetrack and he got into Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And Stenhouse really, to me, looked like he had nowhere to go. Now, obviously, we know that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is a driver that's had a little bit of a dirty tendency on the track. He has wrecked people, especially you go back to the Chili Bowl where he just completely ran into the back of Logan Seavey for whatever reason. And to me, when I look at this incident, though, I can't really put blame on Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Now, maybe Ricky Stenhouse Jr. could have backed off the gas pedal a little bit. That would have been one thing I would have done if I was in Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s shoes and position. I would have backed off the gas pedal a little bit just so I'm not completely running into the back of him. But again, it doesn't really fully look like it's Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s fault, like we all kind of originally thought. I think more of that does go on Burt Myers, unfortunately. Again, I have a little bit of theory that something broke on that car. Team Amerivent, while they actually had a really decent car this time around, I do believe that they had some issues with that car, and I think that's one of the reasons why things ended up breaking on it, unfortunately, which is disappointing because, like I said, Burt Myers was moving up to the front and was starting to get his way up inside that top 10. It looked like they had a competitive car this time around. And I think they were there, obviously, joking in Twitter or Instagram and all the places where they're posting saying, hey, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., we're waiting for you. And apparently Stenhouse didn't get the joke from the incident between him and Kyle Busch last year in North Wilkesboro, which, of course, led to a fight breaking out and taking place. Again, we know Burt Myers is interested in making more starts in the NASCAR Cup Series at this point. I'd love to see Burt Myers come back and make a one-off in the sport at some point this year on a short track. We'll see if things end up happening, and we'll see if he gets a chance and opportunity to come back on the racetrack later this year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. Now, Bubba Wallace, of course, going into 2025, has a new crew chief going into the year, and that, of course, is Charles Deneke, who was a crew chief for Christian Eckes in 2024. And Denny Hamlin, in the most recent Action Detrimental that came out a couple days ago, he spoke on the pairing between Bubba Wallace and Charles Deneke. Denny Hamlin basically says that he feels like that these two could have a really strong year heading into 2025, and he feels like there's something special in that these two could have a really, really good season working together in 2025. We saw well this team performed at the Cookout Clash this past week a couple days ago, where Bubba Wallace was able to finish inside of the top 5. And Bubba Wallace was speaking to the media after the race concluded, and he didn't feel even completely satisfied with getting a top 5. His goal is to win races and perform up front. He wanted to go out there and win at Bowman Gray. I look at this pairing, and I said this coming into 2025. When it was announced that Charles Deneke was going to be the crew chief for Bubba Wallace this year, I was like, this is a pairing that honestly could have a major breakout season. We saw while Charles Deneke worked with Christian Eckes in the Craftsman Truck Series last year, and he worked extremely well with Christian Eckes. Christian Eckes won 4 races in 2024, and of course he was able to go out there and make the Final Four, but unfortunately ended up not winning the championship because he just didn't have the performance and wasn't quick enough on the final race, unfortunately. But I think that Bubba Wallace and Charles Deneke are in for a really good season. And historically, every single year, Bubba Wallace has improved on a year-by-year basis. He had his best season last year in 2024, where he had 6 top 5s and 13 top 10 finishes. People are saying, oh, Bubba Wallace was terrible last year, didn't perform. And let's just remind people that had it been not for the fact we had a bunch of fluke winners going to victory lane, guys like Austin Cindric, Daniel Suarez, and Harrison Burton, Bubba Wallace would have made the playoffs last year. He was very good in 2024, had his best season up to this point, best average finish, best everything that has happened up to this point. And I think that we should kind of think about that, right? Bubba Wallace, in my opinion, is a very, very talented race car driver. But people are always saying, oh, he's a mid-driver. He doesn't deserve to be behind the wheel of the car. Yet every single year he's improved, and he would have made the playoffs. I've already predicted going into this season that Bubba Wallace is going to have a multi-win season in the NASCAR Cup Series, or a 1 or 2 win year. And I think there's a very good chance and possibly that he can go all the way to the round of 8 this year. Because I think that he needs someone in there who's going to tell him how to do things better. And I think Bubba Wallace needed that. As much as Booty Barker was a very solid crew chief with Bubba, they were losing the adjustments on that car throughout the race, and they started losing a lot of the pace and speed they would have early in the events. But I think this could be a career year for Bubba Wallace with the team, and I think overall, I think that this duo could be a duo to watch out for throughout the 2025 season. So we'll see how things go for both of them throughout the year and the season, but I think that this is a duo to watch out for, as I think it could be a big breakout season for Bubba Wallace in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025. Excited to see what Bubba and Charles can do in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Justin Bonsignore. As it was officially confirmed yesterday or a couple days ago that Justin Bonsignore will drive the number 19 for Joe Gibbs Racing for 9 races in 2025. His first race will be at Daytona International Speedway, and he has a lot of the shorter, flatter ovals on the schedule for this year. Among those is Iowa. I think I saw Richmond on the schedule, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's got Phoenix on the schedule later in the year, and he's got a couple other big-time races coming up in 2025 as well. Originally, Justin Bonsignore only had, and Rocking was on there too, by the way. Originally, Justin Bonsignore had 5 races on the schedule in the number 19 car for this season, so he's increasing from 5 races up to 9 races in 2025. Last year, Justin Bonsignore ran for the first time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series with Joe Gibbs Racing, and he did a very, very impressive job out on the track. He was very competitive at New Hampshire Motor Speedway, legitimately had a car that could have won, and was inside the top 5 and was running as high as second throughout the race, and I think he actually led a couple laps last year at New Hampshire as well. Justin Bonsignore is going to have some pretty high expectations in 2025. I could realistically see him going into this year picking up a win and a victory. I think that this number 19 car, especially with it being the All-Star car going into the year and having an All-Star crew chief working with it, I do think that the number 19 car with Justin Bonsignore could get a win or two this year. There is a lot of competition, don't get me wrong, but you've lost some of those big names like Shane Van Gisbergen going into the year, who of course is going full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series, and you're not going to have as many Cup guys most likely dropping down to Xfinity, even though SVG and Ross Chastain are going to make select starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and we also know the Hendrick car is coming back with guys like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, William Byron, which we know that car will very likely have a chance and opportunity to go to victory lane. But I do think that Bonsignore has a very good opportunity here to pick up a win or two this year. I look at that Iowa race. That's a race where it's kind of very similar to his driving style, and you got to be really good at modifieds to run really good at that track. So I do think that there's an opportunity there for that car to perform very, very well. So we'll see how things end up going for Justin Bonsignore in 2025. But like I said, I think it's great that he's getting the opportunity. Now, we don't know who the rest of the drivers are going to be behind the wheel of that car for this year. I would have to think that guys like Martin Truex Jr., Ryan Truex, I'd have to think Christopher Bell, I'd have to think, we know Chase Briscoe for sure is confirmed for the seat, and maybe some other drivers in the Toyota stable could get a chance and opportunity, maybe like a Bubba Wallace as well. I think that'd be cool for him to get the chance and opportunity, but we also don't know officially for sure yet about ARCA and whether he's coming back this year or not at this time. I'm leaning toward maybe not at this point, but we'll have to kind of wait and see if Eric Almirola does decide to go ahead and come back in 2025. Nonetheless, it's certainly interesting for sure, but it's good to see that we're going to get to see Justin Bonsignore make more starts with the program in 2025, and I think he definitely will be very competitive with this team in the 2025 year in 2025 season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Cookout Clash TV ratings. As there was a report by Adam Stern yesterday afternoon that Fox got a 1.55 rating and 3.08 million viewers for Sunday's Cookout Clash. That is up from 2023, but off from 2021 and 2022. I believe in 2021 or 22, I should say, it was basically down. Actually, 2022, it was up, I think, if like 4.1 or 4.2 million viewers. In 2023, it was down 3.7 million. And last year, of course, because it got moved a day early, it went all the way down to 1.5 million. So for it to be up 3.08 or 3.1 million viewers, honestly, that is not bad, considering the fact that I don't think Fox even at one point promoted this race at all. There's a couple things that I think, reasons why I think that this honestly is actually a win for the sport. Now, granted, it being down is not the greatest thing to hear in the world, but a couple things that I think played a factor in the ratings being down. Again, number one, I don't think Fox promoted it at all. I could be wrong, and if they did, let me know in the comments, but I don't think they promoted this race at all. Because we know they promoted the IndyCar series, of course, with them becoming a new product with IndyCar this year. It made a lot of sense for them to do a lot of promotion for the IndyCar stuff going into 2025. I think that's one big reason why we've seen more IndyCar stuff with them joining up this year. But the other thing is that they have promoted a lot of the Daytona 500, which is understandable. It is the biggest race of the year. However, I feel like that if we need, people should know exactly when the season is actually supposed to start, and the Clash is when the race is supposed to start. I saw more promotion on YouTube from people like myself. I saw more promotion from people on Twitter that do watch the sport than I saw from Fox. I think we all know at this point that Fox does not 100% care about the sport completely at this moment, and I do think that is why we're not seeing as much promotion for the sport as a whole. But I do think when it comes to the TV ratings, so having 3 million people tune in is not that bad, all things considered. Look, we are expecting that we are going to see massive drops in TV ratings, especially with more races on cable this year and less races on broadcast. There's only 4 other races, I believe, with Fox scheduled on main Fox this year. Daytona in next week or so. I believe Coda and Atlanta are going to be on Fox. And then I think Talladega in April is the last race that's going to be on Fox this year. So overall, it's not the most shocking and surprising thing to see with the ratings. I'm not completely surprised about them being decent. I think 3 million people tuning in is not that bad, all things considered. I hope we at least get some decent ratings, especially when we go to Amazon, because I think some people are not going to be able to adapt to going to Amazon this year. But I do think the TV ratings, at least this time around, for the Cookout Clash are not that bad, all things considered. I think they're decent. They don't look too bad, in my opinion. And nonetheless, it is certainly interesting to see the ratings that did come out this time around for the Cookout Clash. And I don't think they're too bad. They definitely could be better for sure, but I don't think they're that bad for the Cookout Clash. Definitely interesting to see those numbers, though, from the Clash, as we saw the most popular driver in the sport, Chase Elliott, go to victory lane, and you still have big people in the sport that were racing, like Bubba Wallace, Kyle Busch, Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, and Chase Elliott, and Kyle Larson, all those people running like Ross has seen, too. Certainly interesting stuff overall when it comes to that, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tyler Reddick. Now, very recently, Tyler Reddick did a one-on-one interview with Jenna Fryer from the Associated Press and revealed some very interesting information as, of course, he is focused on the 2025 Daytona 500. But he revealed some very interesting information in regards to the lawsuit that is going on. Now, obviously, Tyler Reddick drives for 23XI, which is one of the teams that's currently involved in the lawsuit with NASCAR. Currently, 23XI Front Row Motorsports is suing NASCAR at the moment on antitrust claims. And a lot of things have been going very positively on the 23XI and Front Row Motorsports side. Now, one thing to note in regards to this is Tyler Reddick did speak to Jenna Fryer and said it is definitely was at the time very, very stressful when it came to that. He wasn't completely worried about it at all at the time and was keeping up to it, especially at the time, but wasn't all out worried, but he's definitely a little bit worried about his future. We talked about this on the channel a couple months ago, but it almost became very possible had NASCAR basically was able to win the antitrust suit at the time, and they were not granted their preliminary injunction, that being 23XI Front Row. It is very likely that Tyler Reddick would have become a free agent at the end of last year and could have been looking for a ride. And it wasn't just Tyler Reddick. Everyone at 23XI, including Bubba Wallace and Riley Herbst, and all the Front Row Motorsports drivers of Todd Gillen, Noah Gragson, Zane Smith, and even Corey Heim could have all been looking for new rides headed into 2025 in the NASCAR Cup Series had it not been for the fact that they were able to be granted their preliminary injunction, which is certainly very, very interesting when you think about the fact that with where silly season was at the time, a lot of teams would have been changing their plans, and there would have been a lot of scrambling to find some new rides for the year, and we could have had an absolute frenzy when it comes to finding new rides for 2025, and multiple of these drivers would probably have been back down in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and some of them would have gone down to the Craftsman Truck Series had this not been figured out for them. Imagine Tyler Reddick, who is one of the most talented drivers in the field, not driving for 23XI Racing. Imagine Bubba Wallace, who brings a lot of sponsorship and funding to the team, not driving for the team this year. And we've seen this with some of the sponsors too. We've seen a few sponsors from 23XI Racing back out because of this lawsuit. One of those being Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper is no longer a sponsor, I believe, at 23XI Racing, and they've been a sponsor with 23XI Racing going all the way back to the start of the team 4 or 5 years ago in 2021. And then you think about Moneyline. Moneyline joined the team in 2022, the sponsor Kurt Busch, and of course Bubba Wallace throughout the last couple of years. So that would have definitely been a major, major loss had they lost those sponsors going into the year and season. And overall, it is certainly interesting to think about, right? Because we think about when it comes to Tyler Reddick and how great of a driver he's been. He's picked up 5 or 6 wins with this organization, and he's become a top-level driver in the sport. And I think it would have been so wild to see a driver like Tyler Reddick, who's been very, very strong in this series. It would have certainly been very interesting had he lost his ride with 23XI because of the antitrust claims and breaking the contract rules they have set on the deal. It's certainly interesting for sure. At least for now, Tyler Reddick can put full focus toward the Daytona 500 this year, where I do think that he has a really good chance and opportunity to win the Daytona 500 if he could be up front at the end of the race. Again, we'll be following the story as time progresses and goes on. We're waiting on some of the other appeals, among other things, with the lawsuit, and there's probably going to be more information that comes out We know that NASCAR and everyone involved in the lawsuit wants to wrap everything up by the end of this year. Discovery is due, I believe, on July 17th or July 18th, and they want the court case date to be set on December 1st at the end of the year, which is now about 9 months away at this point. So it's going to be certainly interesting to follow this story as time progresses and goes on, and we'll keep it up to date on that lawsuit. But it's kind of wild to think that Tyler Reddick could have been a free agent at the end of the last year and could have been looking for a new ride had they've not been able to come to getting that preliminary injunction set for 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Xfinity. Now, yesterday, Xfinity signed a multi-year contract extension with NASCAR to continue being a premier partner in the sport. And they announced a ton of different things in regards to 2025. First, they are going to have a commercial with Tyler Reddick at this year's Daytona 500 that will air throughout the Daytona 500 this year, and I think it's also may air during the Super Bowl as well. Next, Xfinity will continue being the premier sponsor of the penultimate race at Martinsville Speedway for the second to last race of the year. They've been the title sponsor of that event since, I believe, 2019 or 2020. They will continue doing that for the next couple of years. But there's two big things that were announced in regards to Xfinity yesterday. So, first, it was announced that Xfinity is going to end its title sponsorship of the secondary series, the Xfinity Series, after conclusion of 2025. If you've been paying attention to the news, this is not that shocking or surprising. There's been rumors and speculation about this going all the way back to 2023. And of course, with Xfinity being on a rival brand of the CW, which of course CW struck a deal with the secondary series, going into 2025, they'll be airing every single NASCAR Xfinity Series race, including the practice and qualifying sessions, will be aired on the broadcast there. But you got to remember, Xfinity is owned by Comcast, right? And Nexstar owns the CW, two rival brands. I thought it was very unlikely that they were going to be working together in 2025. They almost did not strike a deal for 2025, but Xfinity, in the best respect, they're giving them some time to go and find a new branding and sponsorship for 2026. And it's been kind of crazy how long Xfinity's had to deal with the secondary series. They've been working with the secondary series going all the way back to 2015, right? They joined in 2014, started working there, and then in 2015 became the premier sponsor for the series. We've seen a lot of drivers be able to blossom in this day and age since it's come around. Guys like Kyle Busch have gotten their 100th career NASCAR Cup Series victories. We've seen drivers have blossomed during this time. Guys like Christopher Bell, Cole Custer, Bubba Wallace, Daniel Suarez, and even now this year, guys like Connor Zillage, Christian Eckes are blossoming. Sam Mayer's blossomed during this time. We've seen Hailie Deegan race in this series when it was the NASCAR Xfinity Series, when it's called that for a long time. And there's been other brandings that have been able to work with Xfinity for many, many years. So this isn't the most shocking, surprising news to hear, though, unfortunately. Now, the big question that's going to be asked is what is going to be the replacement title sponsor, because they're expected to go search for a new sponsor throughout the year. Well, I think there's only one sponsor in particular that makes the most sense, and that is Busch. Busch was a title sponsor of the secondary series from 1984 to 2007. Then in 2008, it became the NASCAR Nationwide Series, which Nationwide held from 2008 all the way to the end of 2014. And I think it would make the most sense for Busch to come back. Busch does have a mere partnership with NASCAR at this point, so it would make the most sense to go to something you already have. Now, Busch apparently pays about $15 to $16 million for their premier partnerships. They probably would pay that much every single race, because I think with Busch, how much they're doing, of course, they're going to have an average wash at seen at this year's Daytona 500 and during the Super Bowl as well. I think that would make the most sense for me to see Busch come into play and be the premier sponsor of the sport. So I think that is certainly something to watch out for, but I do think that'll be a big story to follow as we progress throughout the rest of the year. But the other big news that's coming into play when it comes to Xfinity is they are upgrading on the other side of things with their premier partnership. In fact, a new rule is coming into play for this year called the Xfinity Fastest Lap. Now, this will go into effect for every single points-paying NASCAR Cup, Xfinity, and Truck Series event. The driver that has the fastest lap will basically be awarded an extra point. this could have an effect on the championship throughout the year. A driver that's struggling in a race especially could come down to pit road and they could put on new set fresh tires and try to put in performance of the fastest lap when it comes to strategy. That could be an extra point for them, and that could really have a big effect on the championship. Kyle Larson would have had 5 of the fastest laps in the events last year, which would have put Kyle Larson in the championship 4, because I think Larson only missed it by 3 or 4 points. And I think it also would have put Christopher Bell in the final 4 as well, and William Byron most likely would not have made the championship 4, and that could have affected the championship in a really, really big way. But I think that this fastest lap, I do like it. I'm glad to see they're going to be awarding an extra point to the teams overall. Now, that being said, this could lead to some chaos in regards to other things. It could lead to some issues during super speedways, and I do think that's one issue with that I gotta say, is the fact that there's a potential possibility that with Xfinity that there could be some major issues on that front going into the year, where I think at super speedways it could become a problem, because especially if someone gets a huge run on somebody and tries to make a pass, it could lead to issues on that front potentially. But I do think for them adding an extra point, it does work, especially with Xfinity. Now, I'd love to see in the future them go back to giving it a point for leading a lap and having a point for the most laps led. That's something that I would like to see once again. I thought that was a cool rule they had for a very, very long time that went away when they brought the Sage era coming in 2017. But I do think awarding those kind of points would certainly be something that I'd like to see going forward. Though it's going to be interesting to see how some of that plays out. But I think having an Xfinity fastest lap is certainly interesting. And I think it's going to bring a new touch to the sport as a whole. Overall, when it comes to Xfinity, it's good to see that they're going to be coming back at least for one more year for Xfinity. I do think for Busch, it should be the title sponsor for the secondary series. We'll have to kind of wait and see what happens in regards to that going into 2026. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bowman Gray Stadium. Now, of course, a couple days ago, the first NASCAR Cup Series race since 1971 at the track of Bowman Gray officially took place. And a lot of drivers had their opinions on Bowman Gray and the future of the track coming back. Chase Lay spoke on Bowman Gray, and he says that if we have to rotate and we can't do it next year, we should come back to Bowman Gray in 2026. And Bob Pockers wrote out a very interesting article in regards to Bowman Gray's future in the sport. And a lot of drivers and people in the industry have had their opinions on Bowman Gray. Now, I think that the first cookout clash at the track of Bowman Gray Stadium, I think it was an absolute success. I thought the racing generally was really, really good. Sure, during the last chance qualifier and the heat races, you had your madhouse moments that ended up taking place. But I think that Bowman Gray generally put on a very, very solid show and a very, very good product. And I think that the fans really enjoyed it and loved it. Now, I wish Fox Sports would have done a better job showing how the fans felt throughout the event. They didn't pump up the crowd noise during the event, which is certainly interesting. And looking at the TV ratings as a whole, I do think that Bowman Gray deserves another year on the schedule. And I was a little skeptical when they announced that they were going to be going to Bowman Gray, but now I'm absolutely for it. Fans want it back, and I think a lot of fans and people in the industry would be very, very happy to have Bowman Gray as the clash going forward in 2026. However, there is a lot of rumors and speculation currently at the moment right now that they're not going to be going back to Bowman Gray at least for the Clash next year. It sounds like that very likely NASCAR could be taking the Clash International in 2026 and going to Sao Paulo or the Interlagos track next year. Now, as much as I think NASCAR going international is really, really cool, and I think it'd definitely be very, very fun to go international next year, I personally think we should focus on not going international for the Clash. I think if you want to do an international date and do things a little different and go to different venues, fine, that's understandable. But I would rather go to like a short track in the U.S. for the Clash to save teams a little bit money than do that. Now, if Bowman Gray doesn't return at least to the Clash next year, I would like to see this race, not the race itself be the Clash, but I think it should be the All-Star race. I've suggested this for the last couple of years, that Bowman Gray should be the All-Star race and give North Wilkesboro a points-paying event. and basically replace it with one of the Phoenix dates, because let's be real and honest, no disrespect to Phoenix, but Phoenix should not host 2 dates in my opinion. I get that the racetrack sells out, but the racing product just hasn't been good at Phoenix really ever at this point, so get rid of one of the dates there. But there's also rumors of Rockingham coming on the schedule in Cup next year, and there's rumors of other tracks coming back like Chicagoland, and you've got rumors of like that Interlagos track, and rumors of going like Seattle, among other things. But I think Bowman Gray absolutely should be on the schedule next year. I think Bowman Gray would be a really fun track to go to once again. And again, I think the racing product, like I've already mentioned, was really, really entertaining and super, super fun to watch. And I think most fans would absolutely love to see Bowman Gray make a comeback next year in 2026. But NASCAR is going to have a tough decision to make when it comes to the Clash and bringing the track back. Because I do truly believe that Bowman Gray has earned another year on the schedule. I really think it has, and I think it should come back. I think the fans would be very happy to go to it. I think that it's a short trip for the teams. It makes a lot of sense, and it saves the teams a lot of money as well. I know there's been a lot of suggestions from people of going back to Daytona for the Clash. And here's the issue with that. As much as it would definitely be somewhat cool to go back to Daytona for the Clash, here's the one big problem that comes into play. People did not show up the last couple years, and you cannot tell me COVID came into play in 2020. The Clash happened before COVID became a thing, and nobody showed up in 2020, and nobody really showed up in 2019. That's why they went away from that, and that's why they decided to go ahead and go the direction they ended up truly going. So again, overall, I do truly believe that Bowman Gray deserves another year on the schedule next year. I think, again, short track racing can definitely be better, and there's some aero stuff with the car that definitely needs to be worked on, but I think making it the All-Star race should be the thing. Now, I don't think it should be a points-paying race, personally. I don't think we need a quarter-mile track as a points-paying event, but making it the All-Star race in 2025 would definitely be the way I would go with it, especially, right? Because I think that it being the All-Star race and being an All-Star event, racing for $1 million, would make the drivers go absolutely wild and nuts, and I think fans would absolutely tune in. Plus, it's a short drive to the track. You've got, of course, the Coast 600 the next week especially, and I think this should be the All-Star race if we don't go back here for the Clash next year. So we'll see what happens in regards to that, in regards to the future of the Clash. But again, like I've already mentioned and said, I truly do believe that the Clash and Bowman Gray needs to come back next year, and I really hope it does make a comeback in 2026. We hope it does. I really want to see Bowman Gray on the schedule next year. I really hope they make the decision to go ahead and make a comeback to it next year. We'll see what happens in regards to the future of the Cookout Clash at Bowman Gray, or Bowman Gray being on the schedule, but I think it definitely should come back in 2026. So, that is good for today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's discussion below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think Bowman Gray should be back on the schedule next year or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Xfinity ending their title sponsorship with the secondary series? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If there's any major news that does break throughout today, we'll discuss here live on the channel. If not, the next time you'll likely see me, we'll be doing barely an update on the sponsor silly season stuff tomorrow. We also likely will have a paint scheme video dropping potentially as well in the next couple of days. Then on Friday, we will have another news video most likely dropping. And then over the weekend, we should have some special content dropping that you should be seeing on the channel. And then, of course, next week, we're going to have a look at some of the Daytona 500 stuff. Yesterday, I uploaded a Daytona 500 intro list video. I've got more content coming soon. People like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Ertz, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, other people like Connor Zilic, all those big names among others like Bubba Wallace, Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson, all that good stuff. Chase Elliott, Ross Chastain, Brad Keselowski, all that good stuff will be dropping on the channel very, very soon. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more and channel stuff ARCA on Roll 2. So see you guys there for all the good content soon. Take care, everybody.